Jay Kelly, so handsome.
Look at you, you're the American dream.
We did this together.
See you, Dad. I'm leaving on Saturday for Paris.
This is your last summer. It'll be so lonely here without you. Thinking about her leaving, I feel like I missed it.
We need you now. Jay's having a nervous breakdown.
Jay, where are we going?
Meg, where are we going?
France.
France.
France?
Stars,
Is it?
Pardon, mais c'est Kelly.
they come fast, they come slow.
When I look at you, I see my whole life.
They go like the last light of the sun.
I don't know who to be mad at, but I'm finding myself being very mad at you, Ron.
Be mad at me, Liz. The train was my idea.
That's the problem. I'm not allowed to be mad at you.
Really, I feel like my life doesn't really feel real. Suddenly remembering things. It's like a movie where I'm playing myself. I just want you to come with me to see what I did. It's got to have meant
None of this mean anything to you? Because it means something to me. I mean, you're Jay Kelly, but I'm Jay Kelly too.
That's a crazy thing. Everything you thought you were isn't true.
And
That's what movies are for us.
There are movies about fame, and then there are movies about what happens after fame stops feeling like a reward. Jay Kelly is one of those films. At first glance, it looks like a simple comedy drama starring George Clooney and Adam Sandler. The trailers promised humor, celebrity chaos, awkward conversations, and a road trip like journey across Europe. But beneath the polished surface, Jay Kelly is really a story about identity, regret, aging, friendship, family, and the strange loneliness that can come from being known by millions of people while barely knowing yourself. Directed by Noah Baumbach and co-written with Emily Mortimer, Jay Kelly arrived carrying enormous expectations. Baumbach had already built a reputation for creating deeply human stories filled with uncomfortable truths and emotional honesty. Bringing together George Clooney and Adam Sandler immediately made the project one of the most talked about films of its year. One actor represented old school movie star charisma. The other represented one of the most surprising dramatic talents of modern Hollywood. The result is a film that feels both intimate and grand. The story follows Jay Kelly, a famous actor whose public image has become larger than his real personality. Everywhere he goes, people recognize him. Everyone thinks they know him. Everyone has an opinion about him. Yet, as the movie slowly reveals, Jay himself is no longer sure who he is. This central idea becomes the emotional engine of the film. Rather than focusing on a major career crisis or a giant scandal, the story chooses something more personal. Jay is at a stage of life where success no longer answers the questions he once believed it would answer. He has money, he has fame, he has awards, he has a legacy. Yet something inside him feels unfinished. That feeling drives the entire movie. George Clooney proves once again why he remains one of the most compelling screen presences in Hollywood. His performance is not built around dramatic speeches or emotional breakdowns. Instead, he relies on subtle expressions, pauses, body language, and the quiet sadness hiding behind Jay's public smile. There are moments when Clooney says almost nothing, yet the audience understands exactly what his character is thinking. The role feels especially fascinating because it plays with the audience's perception of Clooney himself. Viewers naturally bring their knowledge of the actor into the film. The movie understands this and cleverly uses that familiarity. It creates a character who feels fictional while also appearing strangely real. Adam Sandler delivers one of the strongest performances of his career as Ron, Jay's loyal manager and longtime friend. Ron could have easily become a typical sidekick character. Instead, Sandler gives him depth, warmth, and emotional complexity. Ron genuinely cares about Jay, but he also struggles with his own frustrations and disappointments. The friendship between Jay and Ron becomes the heart of the film. Many scenes work because of the chemistry between Clooney and Sandler. Their conversations feel natural. Sometimes they are funny, sometimes they are uncomfortable. Sometimes they reveal years of shared history through a single line of dialogue. The film often feels like two old friends trying to understand what their lives have become. One of the biggest reasons the project generated excitement was its extraordinary cast. Alongside Clooney and Sandler, the movie features Laura Dern, Billy Crudup, Riley Keough, Jim Broadbent, Patrick Wilson, Greta Gerwig, Eve Hewson, Alba Rohrwacher, Emily Mortimer, Isla Fisher, Stacy Keach, and several other notable performers. What makes the ensemble impressive is not merely the number of recognizable names. Each actor contributes to the emotional mosaic of Jay's life. Every character represents a different chapter of his past. Some remind him of opportunities he missed, others remind him of relationships he damaged, a few remind him of dreams that never became reality. This structure allows the film to explore a lifetime of memories without feeling like a traditional biography. The development of Jay Kelly began when Noah Baumbach started working on another deeply personal screenplay. Throughout his career, Baumbach has shown a unique ability to examine human relationships with honesty and precision. Whether exploring marriage, family conflict, friendship, or personal ambition, his stories often focus on emotional truths rather than plot mechanics. That creative philosophy is visible throughout Jay Kelly. Instead of building the movie around major twists, Baumbach constructs it around conversations, encounters, reflections, and emotional discoveries. The screenplay was co-written with Emily Mortimer, whose influence can be felt in the warmth and compassion found throughout the story. Together, they created a script that balances humor and sadness with remarkable confidence. One moment the audience is laughing at a painfully awkward celebrity encounter, the next moment they are reflecting on mortality, legacy, and family. That tonal balance becomes one of the film's greatest strengths. Casting the title role was perhaps the most important decision of the entire production. George Clooney feels almost inevitable in retrospect. The character required someone who could instantly convince audiences that he was a world famous movie star. Very few actors possess that level of cultural recognition. Clooney's decades long career gave him the credibility necessary for the role. More importantly, he possesses the emotional intelligence needed to portray a man questioning his own identity. The casting of Adam Sandler was equally inspired. For years, audiences have watched Sandler move effortlessly between broad comedy and serious drama. Films throughout his career demonstrated his ability to uncover surprising emotional depth beneath seemingly ordinary characters. Ron benefits enormously from that skill. Sandler never treats the role as comic relief. Instead, he portrays a man whose friendship with Jay has become both meaningful and complicated. The supporting cast further elevates the material. Laura Dern brings intelligence and emotional honesty to every scene. Billy Crudup provides some of the film's most memorable conversations. Riley Keough contributes a vulnerability that helps ground the story's family dynamics. Jim Broadbent adds wisdom and warmth. Greta Gerwig, despite limited screen time, leaves a strong impression. Together, they create a world that feels lived in and authentic. Production officially moved forward with considerable anticipation. Industry observers immediately viewed the project as a major awards contender. The combination of Baumbach, Clooney, Sandler, and such a prestigious supporting cast generated widespread attention. Yet the filmmakers appeared more interested in creating a meaningful character study than an awards vehicle. That artistic focus benefits the final product. The movie rarely feels like it is chasing prestige. Instead, it feels like a sincere exploration of people confronting the realities of aging, success, and self discovery. Filming took place across multiple international locations, including New York, London, and Tuscany. These locations become more than beautiful backdrops. Each environment reflects a different emotional state within Jay's journey. The bustling energy of major cities contrasts with quieter moments of personal reflection. European settings contribute an atmosphere of nostalgia and introspection. The visual style emphasizes natural beauty without overwhelming the story. Cinematographer Linus Sandgren gives the movie a rich cinematic appearance. His use of light creates a sense of memory and reflection. Many scenes feel almost dreamlike, as though Jay is drifting through fragments of his own life. The decision to shoot on film adds texture and warmth. The images possess a timeless quality that perfectly complements the narrative. Rather than feeling modern and disposable, the movie feels crafted, every frame appears carefully considered. This visual approach reinforces one of the film's central themes. The passage of time, time hangs over every scene. Characters constantly confront the gap between who they once were and who they have become. Memory shaped decisions. Regrets influence conversations, the future feels uncertain, yet the film never becomes hopeless. Instead, it argues that understanding oneself remains possible even later in life. That message resonates throughout the story. As production continued, reports from the set described an unusually collaborative atmosphere. Cast members frequently praised Baumbach's ability to create environments where actors could explore characters naturally. This freedom becomes visible on screen. Conversations rarely feel scripted. Interactions possess spontaneity and authenticity. The audience often feels like they are observing real people rather than watching performances. That quality is difficult to achieve and even harder to sustain over a 2 hour runtime. J. Kelly largely succeeds because it maintains that authenticity from beginning to end. Long before audiences finally saw the finished film, expectations had already reached extraordinary levels. The combination of star power, acclaimed filmmakers, prestigious production companies, and intriguing subject matter transformed Jake Kelly into one of the most anticipated releases of its year. Whether it could actually meet those expectations remained the biggest question. Fortunately, the film demonstrates that strong storytelling remains more important than hype. Instead of trying to impress audiences with spectacle, it chooses something much more challenging. It tries to understand people, and that choice ultimately defines everything that follows. One of the most interesting aspects of J. Kelly is how quietly it unfolds. Modern movies often feel pressured to grab attention every few minutes. They rely on twists, shocking reveals, action sequences, or dramatic confrontations. J. Kelly moves in the opposite direction. It trusts the audience. It believes that people are interesting enough on their own. That confidence comes directly from Noah Baumbach's filmmaking style. Throughout his career, he has shown a fascination with conversations that reveal hidden emotions. A simple discussion over dinner can become more powerful than a car chase. A brief disagreement can reveal years of unresolved tension. In J. Kelly, he pushes this philosophy even further. Many scenes are built around people talking. Yet, those conversations rarely feel ordinary. Every exchange reveals something important about the characters involved. A joke might hide insecurity, a compliment might hide resentment, a casual observation might reveal a lifetime of regret. The screenplay constantly encourages viewers to look beneath the surface. This approach naturally influenced the production process. Actors reportedly spent significant time discussing character histories before filming. Instead of focusing exclusively on dialogue, they explored relationships, motivations, and personal experiences that existed beyond the script. This preparation helps explain why the performances feel so lived in. Characters behave as though they have entire lives outside the movie. Even when someone appears for only a few scenes, they leave an impression. The audience senses that these people existed before the story began and will continue existing after it ends. That feeling is surprisingly rare. George Clooney approached J. Kelly with remarkable restraint. Many actors might have viewed the role as an opportunity for showy emotional moments. Clooney instead chooses subtlety. He understands that Jay is someone who has spent decades controlling his public image. Such a person would not easily reveal vulnerability. As a result, the character often communicates through silence. A glance becomes meaningful, a pause becomes revealing, a smile becomes heartbreaking. One of the most effective aspects of Clooney's performance is how he portrays exhaustion, not physical exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion. Jay has spent years performing versions of himself for different audiences. Fans expect one thing. Journalists expect another. Friends expect something else. Family members see an entirely different person. Over time, maintaining all those identities becomes exhausting. Clooney captures that burden beautifully. The audience gradually realizes that Jay is not running away from fame, he is running toward honesty. That distinction gives the story emotional depth. Adam Sandler provides a fascinating contrast. Where Jay often appears guarded, Ron is more emotionally transparent. He says things he probably should not say. He expresses frustrations openly. He worries openly. He cares openly. Yet beneath that openness lies his own set of complications. Ron has spent much of his life helping someone else's career. That reality creates complicated emotions. He loves Jay, he respects Jay, but he has also sacrificed parts of his own life along the way. The film never presents this conflict as simple resentment. Instead, it explores the complex reality of long term friendship. People can care deeply about each other while simultaneously carrying disappointments. The relationship between Jay and Ron becomes increasingly layered as the story progresses. Their history feels authentic because the screenplay avoids easy answers. Neither man is entirely right, neither man is entirely wrong. Both have made mistakes, both have experienced pain, both are searching for understanding. That emotional complexity elevates the movie beyond a conventional celebrity drama. Another strength of the screenplay is its treatment of family. Many stories about famous people focus exclusively on career pressures. J. Kelly recognizes that personal relationships often matter far more. Several key scenes examine the distance that can develop between parents and children. Success frequently demands sacrifices, careers require time, fame creates complications, travel separates families. Over years and decades, those small separations can grow into significant emotional gaps. The movie explores these realities with sensitivity. It avoids assigning blame, instead, it examines consequences. People make choices for understandable reasons, those choices still carry costs. This theme resonates throughout the film. The supporting cast contributes significantly to these family dynamics. Riley Keough brings emotional honesty to her scenes. She never overplays dramatic moments. Instead, she allows disappointment, affection, frustration, and hope to coexist. That balance makes her interactions with Clooney particularly effective. Viewers can understand both perspectives. No one becomes a villain, everyone simply feels human. Laura Dern delivers another memorable performance. She has always possessed an extraordinary ability to make dialogue feel spontaneous. In J. Kelly, she brings intelligence and emotional maturity to every scene. Her character challenges Jay in ways others cannot. She recognizes his weaknesses but also sees his potential. Their conversations become some of the film's most compelling moments. What makes those scenes work is the mutual respect between the characters. Even during disagreements, there is understanding. Even during tension, there is affection. The movie repeatedly demonstrates that relationships are rarely simple. People can love each other while struggling to communicate. They can support each other while causing pain. They can seek connection while creating distance. These contradictions make the characters feel real. Visually, the production embraces elegance without becoming flashy. Linus Sandgren's cinematography consistently serves the story. Many shots linger slightly longer than audiences might expect. This creates space for reflection. Instead of rushing toward the next plot point, the camera often observes. Faces become landscapes, expressions become narratives. Small details become significant. The film's visual language encourages patience. Those willing to engage with it are rewarded. The use of European locations deserves special attention. Tuscany, in particular, becomes almost a character itself. Rolling hills, historic architecture, quiet roads, and open skies create a sense of perspective. Against these vast landscapes, personal problems appear both enormous and insignificant. Jay's internal struggles remain important. Yet the beauty surrounding him reminds viewers that life extends beyond individual anxieties. This visual contrast strengthens the story's themes. Several sequences filmed in Italy rank among the movie's most memorable moments. Not because dramatic events occur, rather because the environment encourages introspection. Characters slow down, conversations deepen, memories emerge, questions that have remained buried for years finally surface. The locations help create an atmosphere where emotional honesty feels possible. New York serves a different purpose. Where Tuscany offers peace, New York provides energy. The city represents the pace and pressure of Jay's professional life. Crowd, events, obligations, and expectations constantly surround him. The contrast between these settings reflects the conflict within the character himself. Part of him remains connected to the public world, another part longs for something quieter. The tension between those desires drives much of the narrative. Costume design subtly reinforces these themes. Jay's wardrobe reflects someone accustomed to public appearances. His clothing communicates success and confidence. Yet, as the story progresses, small changes become noticeable. The polished image begins to soften. Appearances become less important. Comfort becomes more important. These details may seem minor, but they contribute significantly to character development. Music also plays an essential role. Rather than overwhelming scenes, the score often operates quietly in the background. The compositions emphasize mood rather than spectacle. Piano melodies, gentle orchestration, and understated arrangements support emotional moments without manipulating them. This restraint proves effective. The audience is allowed to experience feelings naturally. Music guides emotions rather than dictating them. Several musical themes recur throughout the film. Each appearance gains additional meaning as the story develops. By the final act, familiar melodies carry emotional weight because viewers associate them with specific memories and relationships. The soundtrack becomes another storytelling tool. One particularly impressive aspect of the production is its rhythm. The movie understands when to slow down and when to move forward. Scenes breathe, characters think before speaking, moments are allowed to exist. This pacing may challenge viewers expecting constant activity, however, it rewards those interested in character driven storytelling. The film's patience becomes one of its greatest strengths. Another notable achievement involves humor. Although J. Kelly explores serious subjects, it remains surprisingly funny. Baumbach understands that life rarely separates comedy and drama. Embarrassing situations occur during painful moments. People laugh while discussing difficult subjects. Awkwardness often accompanies honesty. The film captures these realities effectively. Many of the funniest moments emerge naturally from character interactions, a misunderstood comment, an uncomfortable interview, an overly enthusiastic fan encounter. A failed attempt to reconnect with someone from the past, these situations generate laughter because they feel believable. The humor never feels manufactured, it grows organically from personality and circumstance. Adam Sandler plays a crucial role in maintaining this balance. His timing remains exceptional. Even in dramatic scenes, he understands how small moments of humor can make characters feel more authentic. Rather than undermining emotional scenes, the comedy enhances them. People rarely behave perfectly during serious conversations. They make jokes, they change subjects, they become nervous, they say the wrong thing. Ron frequently embodies these tendencies. As a result, he becomes one of the film's most relatable characters. The production team clearly understood the importance of maintaining tonal consistency. A film that moves between comedy and drama can easily feel uneven. J. Kelly largely avoids that problem. Every scene feels connected to the same emotional world. The shifts between laughter and sadness appear natural. This achievement reflects careful writing, thoughtful directing, and disciplined performances. As filming progressed across various locations, the movie gradually evolved into something larger than a simple celebrity story. It became an examination of middle age, an examination of friendship, an examination of family, an examination of identity. Most importantly, it became an examination of how people continue growing long after they believe their lives are already defined. That idea gives the film universal appeal. Few viewers will understand life as a world famous movie star. Almost everyone understands uncertainty. Almost everyone has wondered whether they made the right choices. Almost everyone has looked backward while simultaneously worrying about the future. J. Kelly transforms those universal feelings into its central narrative. By doing so, it creates a story that feels personal regardless of background. The audience may enter the movie expecting a Hollywood satire. Instead, they discover something more reflective, something more emotional, something more human. And as the production journey moved toward completion, it became increasingly clear that J. Kelly was not interested in celebrating fame. It was interested in understanding the people hiding behind it. The completion of J. Kelly marked the end of a lengthy creative journey and the beginning of an entirely different challenge, introducing the film to audiences. By the time the movie entered its marketing phase, expectations had already grown enormously. The combination of Noah Baumbach's reputation, George Clooney's star power, Adam Sandler's dramatic credibility, and a cast filled with respected performers ensured that the project attracted attention from both film enthusiasts and casual viewers. Yet, one of the most fascinating aspects of the release campaign was how carefully it avoided revealing too much. Rather than selling the film through major plot twists or emotional revelations, the marketing emphasized mood, character, and atmosphere. Posters highlighted Clooney's thoughtful presence. Trailers focused on conversations, travel, humor, and moments of introspection. The campaign suggested that audiences were being invited on a personal journey rather than an adventure driven by spectacle. This approach reflected the movie itself. In many ways, Jay Kelly is less concerned with where its protagonist is going than with what he discovers along the way. The film opens not with a dramatic event but with a feeling. Jay is introduced as a man surrounded by success. People recognize him everywhere. His schedule is packed. His public image appears polished and carefully maintained. Yet from the beginning, there is a sense that something is missing. Clooney communicates this immediately through subtle performance choices. His smile appears practiced rather than spontaneous. His interactions feel courteous yet slightly detached. Even when surrounded by people, he seems alone. One of the earliest sequences establishes the central conflict of the film. Jay attends a public event where admirers approach him constantly. Fans request photographs, journalists ask questions, industry professionals praise his achievements. On the surface, everything appears positive. Yet the scene is filmed in a way that emphasizes repetition. Similar conversations happen again and again. Different faces ask similar questions. Different people offer similar compliments. The audience gradually understands that Jay has experienced this cycle countless times. What many people would view as a dream life has become routine. The screenplay cleverly avoids criticizing fame itself. Instead, it examines what happens when a person becomes trapped within an identity created by others. Jay has spent decades being viewed as a celebrity. The problem is not that people admire him. The problem is that admiration has become the dominant lens through which everyone sees him. Few people ask what he actually wants. Few people seem interested in the individual beneath the public image. As the story progresses, Adam Sandler's Ron emerges as a crucial figure. Unlike fans, journalists, or industry executives, Ron has known Jay for years. Their friendship predates many of Jay's greatest successes. This shared history creates a relationship built on honesty. Ron is one of the few people willing to challenge Jay directly. At times, he acts as a protector. At other moments, he functions almost like a therapist. He listens, argues, advises, and occasionally criticizes. Sandler brings warmth and authenticity to every interaction, making the friendship feel believable from the first scene. One particularly memorable sequence occurs during a long car ride. On paper, the scene seems simple. Two men discuss their lives while traveling. Yet the writing transforms the conversation into something far richer. Small comments gradually reveal deeper frustrations. Jokes conceal emotional truths. Moments of silence become as important as dialogue. The audience begins to recognize that both men are carrying disappointments they rarely acknowledge openly. Jay questions the direction of his life. Ron questions sacrifices he has made in service of someone else's success. Neither expresses these feelings directly at first. Instead, the emotions emerge gradually through seemingly ordinary conversation. This scene captures one of the film's greatest strengths. It understands that major emotional revelations rarely occur in dramatic bursts. More often, they emerge slowly. People circle difficult subjects before addressing them directly. They test the waters, they hide vulnerability behind humor, they change topics when conversations become uncomfortable. The screenplay captures these patterns with remarkable accuracy. The first half of the film is filled with encounters that function almost like chapters from Jay's personal history. He meets people connected to different periods of his life. Some interactions are warm, others are awkward, a few are openly painful. Each meeting forces him to confront a version of himself he has not fully examined. The structure resembles a journey through memory. Rather than using flashbacks extensively, the movie allows present day conversations to reveal the past. A particularly effective sequence involves Jay reconnecting with someone he has not seen in years. The scene begins politely. Both characters exchange friendly observations and memories. Gradually, however, unresolved emotions surface. The conversation reveals misunderstandings, disappointments, and opportunities that slipped away. Neither character becomes angry, neither launches into a dramatic speech. The sadness comes from recognizing how much time has passed and how little can be changed. This sense of time becomes one of the film's most important themes. Nearly every character is dealing with the consequences of earlier choices. Some feel satisfied, others feel regretful. Most experience a combination of both. The movie repeatedly suggests that adulthood involves learning to live with complexity. Rarely are decisions entirely right or entirely wrong. Every path gained means another path lost. The visual style reinforces these ideas beautifully. Many scenes are filmed during early morning or late afternoon when sunlight appears softer and more reflective. The cinematography often emphasizes distance. Characters stand against large landscapes or expansive city views. These compositions remind viewers of the vastness of the world while highlighting the smallness of individual concerns. Yet, rather than diminishing the characters, this contrast makes them feel more human. The European segments of the story are especially effective. Tuscany provides some of the movie's most beautiful imagery. Rolling hills stretch toward the horizon. Ancient buildings suggest centuries of history. Quiet roads invite contemplation. These locations create an atmosphere where introspection feels natural. The pace slows noticeably. Characters spend more time listening than speaking. The environment encourages reflection. One of the film's most touching moments occurs during a simple meal shared between several characters. There are no major revelations, no dramatic confrontations occur. Instead, the scene focuses on small interactions. People laugh, they tell stories, they remember old experiences. For a brief period, everyone seemed genuinely present. The sequence reminds viewers that happiness often exists within ordinary moments rather than extraordinary achievements. This idea becomes increasingly important as Jay's journey continues. At the beginning of the story, He appears focused on abstract questions about purpose and identity. As the narrative develops, his perspective begins to shift. He starts paying attention to smaller details. Conversations become more meaningful. Relationships become more valuable. Success becomes less important than connection. The supporting cast contributes significantly to this transformation. Laura Dern's character provides some of the movie's sharpest observations. She recognizes patterns in Jay's behavior that he struggles to see himself. Their conversations possess an honesty absent from many of his other interactions. Rather than treating him as a celebrity, she treats him as a person. This distinction becomes increasingly meaningful. Billy Crudup delivers several scenes that rank among the film's most intellectually engaging. His character challenges Jay's assumptions about success, happiness, and personal responsibility. These discussions never feel like philosophical lectures. Instead, they emerge naturally from character relationships. The screenplay trusts audiences to engage with complex ideas without simplifying them. As word of mouth began spreading following early screenings, many viewers praised the film's emotional maturity. Rather than presenting life as a series of victories and defeats, the story acknowledges ambiguity. Characters experience joy and sadness simultaneously. They love people who frustrate them, they regret decisions they would probably make again. They carry wounds while continuing to move forward. These contradictions give the movie authenticity. Critical discussions frequently highlighted the chemistry between Clooney and Sandler. Their partnership forms the emotional foundation of the entire film. Without believable friendship, the story would lose much of its impact. Fortunately, both actors deliver performances rooted in trust and understanding. Their scenes feel spontaneous, as though viewers are observing real conversations rather than scripted exchanges. As the narrative approaches its midpoint, Jay becomes increasingly aware that the answers he seeks may not exist in the form he expected. He cannot simply solve his dissatisfaction through a single decision or dramatic action. The problems he faces are deeper than that. They involve identity, memory, aging, and self acceptance. These issues require reflection rather than solutions. This realization marks a significant turning point. The film gradually shifts from external exploration toward internal examination. The journey becomes less about where Jay travels and more about what he understands. Every encounter contributes another piece to the puzzle. Every conversation reveals another layer of emotional truth. By the midpoint, audience understand that Jay Kelly is not building toward a conventional climax. The story is pursuing something more subtle and arguably more challenging. It seeks insight rather than spectacle. It wants viewers to think about their own lives, relationships, and choices. The movie asks questions without rushing to provide answers. That willingness to embrace uncertainty ultimately becomes one of its defining qualities. It transforms what could have been a straightforward celebrity drama into a thoughtful meditation on identity, friendship, family, and the complicated process of understanding oneself. As the second half of J. Kelly unfolds, the film becomes increasingly introspective. The earlier portions of the story focus on movement, encounters, and conversations with people connected to different periods of Jay's life. By contrast, the later sections concentrate on the emotional consequences of those encounters. The questions that once existed quietly in the background now move to the center of the narrative. Jay can no longer avoid examining the choices that shaped his life. Every conversation has left an impression. Every reunion has forced him to reconsider memories he once viewed with certainty. The result is a gradual but significant transformation in the character's perspective. One of the most effective aspects of the film is how it handles this transformation. Many movies rely on a dramatic revelation that suddenly changes everything. Jay Kelly takes a different approach. Jay's growth occurs through accumulation. Small experiences slowly alter his understanding of himself. A comment from an old friend lingers in his mind. An unexpected reunion forces him to revisit unresolved emotions. A quiet evening spent reflecting on the past creates new insights. The audience witnesses change not as a single moment but as a process. This approach feels authentic because real personal growth rarely happens overnight. George Clooney's performance becomes even stronger during these later sequences. The character's emotional journey is expressed through subtle shifts in behavior rather than dramatic displays. Early in the film, Jay often appears distracted, detached, or emotionally guarded. As the story progresses, he becomes more present. He listens more carefully, he speaks more honestly. He allows himself to acknowledge uncertainty. These changes are small enough to feel believable yet significant enough to demonstrate growth. Clooney understands that the most powerful transformations often occur quietly. A particularly memorable sequence involves Jay revisiting a location connected to an important chapter of his past. The scene contains relatively little dialogue, yet it communicates an enormous amount about the character's emotional state. The camera observes him walking through familiar spaces, absorbing memories that seem almost tangible. The audience senses both nostalgia and regret. There is sadness in recognizing how much time has passed, but there is also gratitude for experiences that helped shape who he became. The sequence exemplifies the film's ability to convey emotion through atmosphere rather than exposition. Adam Sandler continues to provide essential emotional support throughout the second half of the story. Ron's role evolves as Jay's understanding deepens. Early in the film, Ron often functions as a guide or advisor. Later, the relationship becomes more balanced. Jay begins to recognize the sacrifices Ron has made over the years. Their friendship gains additional depth because both men finally address subjects they have avoided discussing openly. These conversations are among the film's most rewarding moments. The screenplay avoids melodrama and instead focuses on honesty. Neither character seeks victory in these exchanges, they simply seek understanding. One scene in particular stands out because of its emotional simplicity. Jay and Ron discuss a period of their lives that neither remembers in exactly the same way. At first, the disagreement appears minor. Yet the conversation gradually reveals larger themes involving memory, perspective, and friendship. Both men realize that people often experience the same events differently. Neither version is necessarily wrong. The truth exists somewhere between individual perceptions. This realization becomes a recurring idea throughout the film. Memories are powerful, but they are also imperfect. The stories people tell themselves about the past shape their identities, even when those stories are incomplete. The supporting cast continues to enrich the narrative during these later sections. Several characters who initially seem peripheral gain greater importance as Jay's emotional journey progresses. Their perspectives help illuminate aspects of his personality that he struggles to recognize. Some challenge him, others offer forgiveness. A few simply provide companionship during moments of uncertainty. Together, they create a network of relationships that feels remarkably authentic. The film's treatment of aging deserves particular attention. Hollywood has produced countless stories about youth, ambition, and success. Far fewer films examine what happens after those goals have been achieved. Jay Kelly explores the emotional realities of later adulthood with honesty and compassion. The movie does not portray aging as a tragedy, nor does it romanticize it. Instead, it acknowledges both gains and losses. Experience brings wisdom, but it also brings awareness of missed opportunities. Confidence increases, yet so does recognition of mortality. The characters navigate these contradictions with grace. This thematic focus gives the film a universality that extends beyond its celebrity setting. Most viewers will never experience life as a famous actor. However, nearly everyone understands the passage of time. Nearly everyone has reflected on earlier choices and wondered how life might have unfolded differently. The movie succeeds because it connects specific circumstances to universal emotions. Fame becomes a backdrop rather than the central subject. The real focus remains human experience. Visually, the second half of the film grows increasingly reflective. The cinematography emphasizes stillness and observation. Long takes allow viewers to absorb emotional nuances. Landscapes become more prominent. Natural light continues to play a significant role, creating images that feel warm, nostalgic, and occasionally bittersweet. The visual style mirrors Jay's internal state. As he slows down and pays greater attention to his surroundings, the film encourages audiences to do the same. The musical score also becomes more emotionally resonant during these later sequences. Themes introduced earlier return with greater significance. Familiar melodies acquire new meanings because the audience now associates them with specific relationships and memories. The music never overwhelms the storytelling. Instead, it enhances emotional moments subtly. This restraint allows viewers to connect with scenes naturally rather than feeling manipulated. As release discussions intensified, many critics focused on the film's unusual structure. Some praised its patience and emotional intelligence. Others noted that it deliberately avoids traditional dramatic formulas. The movie is less interested in plot mechanics than character exploration. This approach naturally divided some viewers. Audiences expecting major twists or high stakes conflict occasionally found the pacing challenging. However, those drawn to character driven storytelling often embraced the film enthusiastically. Critical reception frequently highlighted the screenplay's maturity. Reviewers praised its willingness to explore complicated emotions without simplifying them. Relationships remain messy, problems remain partially unresolved. Characters continue carrying uncertainties even after significant personal growth. These qualities made the story feel realistic. Life rarely provides perfect closure, and the film respects that reality. Many critics also singled out George Clooney's performance as one of the strongest of his later career. Rather than relying on charisma alone, he delivers a deeply considered portrayal of a man confronting questions he can no longer ignore. The performance demonstrates remarkable confidence because it rarely seeks attention. Clooney trusts subtlety, and that trust pays off throughout the film. Adam Sandler received substantial praise as well. His dramatic work has earned increasing recognition over the years, and Jay Kelly further strengthens that reputation. Critics noted his ability to balance humor, vulnerability, and emotional authenticity. Ron could easily have become a supporting character defined solely by loyalty. Instead, Sandler transforms him into a fully realized individual with his own desires, frustrations, and emotional needs. Audience reactions often centered on the film's emotional relatability. Many viewers connected strongly with themes involving friendship, family, aging, and self reflection. Discussions frequently focused on specific conversations rather than plot events. This is perhaps the clearest indication of the movie's strengths. Rather than generating excitement through spectacle, it creates lasting impressions through human interaction. The film also inspired numerous online discussions and memes, though not in the way blockbuster franchises often do. Instead of becoming associated with action scenes or visual effects, J. Kelly generated attention for its thoughtful dialogue and relatable observations about life. Certain lines resonated with audiences because they captured feelings many people struggle to express. Screenshots of conversations circulated widely, accompanied by personal reflections about aging, relationships, and identity. From a box office perspective, the film occupied an interesting position. It was never designed to compete directly with large scale action spectacles. Its success depended more on strong reviews, positive word of mouth, and sustained audience interest. Films driven by character and conversation often build momentum gradually rather than opening with massive numbers. In that regard, J. Kelly benefited from continued discussion among viewers who appreciated its emotional depth. Award speculation emerged almost immediately following early screenings. George Clooney and Adam Sandler both attracted attention for their performances. The screenplay also generated considerable admiration. Whether or not the film ultimately dominated awards season, it clearly established itself as one of the year's most respected releases. Its artistic ambitions, accomplished performances, and thoughtful storytelling ensured a place within broader conversations about contemporary cinema. Perhaps the most significant achievement of J. Kelly lies in its refusal to provide easy answers. By the final act, Jay has gained greater self awareness, but he has not solved every problem. Relationships remain complicated. The future remains uncertain. Life continues moving forward, yet something important has changed. He no longer views uncertainty as failure. Instead, he accepts it as part of being human. The ending reflects this philosophy beautifully. Rather than delivering a grand statement, the film concludes with emotional honesty. The final moments emphasize presence rather than resolution. Jay has not become a different person, he has become a more honest version of himself. The distinction matters. The movie suggests that fulfillment does not come from reinventing one's life entirely. Sometimes it comes from understanding and accepting the life already lived. This conclusion ties together the film's central themes. Identity is not fixed. Growth remains possible at any age. Relationships matter more than achievements. Success alone cannot provide meaning. human connection remains essential. These ideas may not be revolutionary, but the film presents them with sincerity and intelligence. By the time the credits roll, J. Kelly feels less like a story about a celebrity and more like a reflection on life itself. It examines ambition, regret, friendship, family, memory, and aging with empathy and insight. Through strong performances, thoughtful writing, and elegant filmmaking, it transforms familiar themes into something emotionally resonant. What makes J. Kelly particularly fascinating when examined more closely is the way it quietly challenges traditional ideas about success. Most films centered on famous people eventually arrive at one of two conclusions. Either fame destroys the protagonist, or fame ultimately validates everything they sacrifice to achieve it. J. Kelly rejects both possibilities. The film argues that success is neither salvation nor punishment. It is simply one aspect of a person's life. Jay's wealth, recognition, and accomplishments matter, but they do not answer the deeper questions that continue to haunt him. This perspective gives the movie a maturity that separates it from many celebrity dramas. Throughout the story, there is a recurring tension between public perception and private reality. Nearly everyone who encounters Jay sees a version of him shaped by movies, interviews, magazine covers, and cultural mythology. People assume they know him because they have spent years watching him. Yet the film repeatedly demonstrates how incomplete those assumptions are. Jay himself sometimes struggles to distinguish between the person he truly is and the persona he has spent decades presenting to the world. This theme becomes increasingly relevant as the narrative progresses. Several supporting characters remember different versions of Jay. Some remember the ambitious young actor eager to prove himself. Others remember the charming celebrity who could command attention in any room. A few remember a friend who disappeared as his career expanded. Each perspective contains some truth. None tells the complete story. The audience gradually realizes that identity is not a fixed object but a collection of experiences, memories, and relationships. The screenplay explores this idea with remarkable sensitivity. Rather than portraying Jay as a victim of fame, it acknowledges his role in constructing his own public image. Over the years, he has made choices, he has embraced opportunities, he has cultivated certain perceptions. The consequences of those decisions are now part of his life. This complexity prevents the character from becoming overly sympathetic or self pitying. He is neither hero nor victim. He is simply human. One of the film's most impressive qualities is its understanding of loneliness. Many movies depict loneliness through physical isolation. Characters sit alone in empty rooms or wander through deserted landscapes. Jay Kelly presents a different form of loneliness. Jay is almost never physically alone. People surround him constantly. Fans approach him, colleagues seek his attention, friends contact him. Yet, despite this constant interaction, he often feels disconnected. The film suggests that loneliness can emerge not from a lack of company but from a lack of genuine understanding. George Clooney communicates this emotional state beautifully. His performance often relies on contrast. Jay appears confident in public settings but uncertain during private moments. He effortlessly handles professional obligations yet struggles with personal conversations. The audience watches a man capable of commanding a room while simultaneously questioning his own sense of purpose. This contradiction makes the character compelling. The friendship between Jay and Ron continues to provide some of the film's richest material. Their relationship evolves beyond the typical dynamic between celebrity and manager. Over time, it becomes clear that they function almost like family. They understand each other's habits, weaknesses, and fears. Yet, familiarity does not eliminate conflict. In some ways, it intensifies it. Long term relationships accumulate history, and history carries emotional weight. Several scenes examine this reality with remarkable honesty. Jay and Ron occasionally disagree about past events. They remember situations differently. They interpret decisions differently. Neither perspective is entirely correct or entirely incorrect. The film recognizes that memory is objective. People construct narratives about their lives, and those narratives influence how they view themselves and others. This focus on memory becomes one of the movie's most powerful recurring motifs. Nearly every major character is shaped by recollection. Some memories bring comfort, others bring regret. A few continue to cause pain despite the passage of years. The film repeatedly suggests that understanding the past requires accepting its complexity. Simplified stories rarely capture emotional truth. The production design subtly reinforces these themes. Many locations contain objects that hint at previous experiences. Photographs, personal belongings, old buildings, and familiar environments all contribute to a sense of accumulated history. The world of the film feels inhabited by memories. Characters constantly encounter reminders of earlier versions of themselves. These visual details enrich the storytelling without drawing unnecessary attention. Another notable aspect of the movie is its treatment of generational differences. Jay belongs to a generation of movie stars shaped by traditional Hollywood systems. Younger characters often view fame differently. They exist in a world defined by social media, instant visibility, and constant public engagement. The contrast creates interesting conversations about celebrity, privacy, and identity. The screenplay never suggests that one generation understands these issues better than another. Instead, it explores how changing cultural circumstances influence personal experiences. Jay's struggles are unique to his era, yet younger characters face challenges of their own. This balanced approach prevents the film from becoming nostalgic or dismissive. The movie also contains a surprisingly thoughtful examination of artistic legacy. Jay has spent decades building a career. His work has influenced audiences around the world. Yet he increasingly wonders what remains after professional achievements lose their immediate importance. This question resonates throughout the second half of the story. What does it mean to leave something behind? How should success be measured? Are accomplishments enough on their own? The film does not offer definitive answers. Instead, it presents various perspectives through different characters. Some believe legacy is defined by work, others emphasize relationships. A few argue that influence matters more than recognition. These conversations enrich the narrative by encouraging viewers to consider their own beliefs. One particularly moving sequence involves Jay reflecting on earlier ambitions. He remembers goals that once seemed incredibly important. Some were achieved, others were abandoned. Looking back, he realizes that many accomplishments provided satisfaction for shorter periods than he expected. Meanwhile, certain relationships and experiences gained significance over time. This realization becomes one of the film's central insights. People often misunderstand what will matter most to them in the future. The pacing of the film deserves additional recognition. Modern audiences are accustomed to rapid storytelling rhythms. J. Kelly intentionally moves more slowly. Scenes unfold naturally. Conversations continue beyond the point where many movies would cut away. Silences are allowed to exist. This patience creates space for reflection. Viewers are encouraged not merely to follow the plot but to engage with emotional nuances. For some audiences, this deliberate pacing may feel unusual. For others, it becomes one of the movie's greatest strengths. The story trusts viewers to remain engaged without constant stimulation. That confidence reflects both the quality of the writing and the strengths of the performances. Critical analysis frequently compared the film to earlier character driven dramas that prioritized emotional truth over narrative spectacle. Such comparisons are understandable. J. Kelly belongs to a tradition of filmmaking that values observation, conversation, and introspection. Yet it also feels contemporary because of its interest in modern celebrity culture and evolving ideas about identity. The film's humor remains important throughout these more serious explorations. Baumbach understands that life rarely separates comedy from drama. Awkward situations continue to occur even during emotionally significant moments. Characters say the wrong thing, misunderstandings arise, social interactions become uncomfortable. These moments generate genuine laughter while simultaneously revealing deeper truths. Adam Sandler's contributions are especially valuable in this regard. His instincts for comedy allow him to find humor within realistic situations. Rather than interrupting emotional scenes, the laughter often enhances them. It reminds audiences that vulnerability and absurdity frequently coexist. As discussions about the film expanded, many viewers highlighted specific lines of dialogue that resonated with them. The screenplay contains numerous observations about aging, friendship, family, and personal growth that feel authentic rather than manufactured. These moments became popular because they articulated emotions many people recognize but rarely express. The film succeeds when it captures experiences that feel simultaneously specific and universal. Another reason the movie generated conversation is its refusal to divide characters into heroes and villains. Even individuals who disappoint Jay possess understandable motivations. Likewise, Jay himself is not always admirable, he makes mistakes. He avoids difficult conversations. He occasionally prioritizes comfort over honesty. These imperfections make the characters feel real. The film's emotional power ultimately emerges from empathy. Every major character receives the opportunity to explain their perspective. The audience may not agree with every decision, but they usually understand why those decisions were made. This commitment to empathy gives the story depth and emotional credibility. Viewed as a whole, J. Kelly functions on multiple levels. It is a character study, a friendship drama, a reflection on aging, a meditation on memory, and a commentary on celebrity culture. Yet beneath all these elements lies a simpler story about a man trying to understand himself. That simplicity provides the foundation supporting everything else. The longer one thinks about the film, the clearer its intentions become. It is not interested in extraordinary events, it is interested in ordinary truths. It examines the gap between achievement and fulfillment, between public image and private reality, between memory and experience. These themes are familiar because they belong to human life itself, and perhaps that is why J. Kelly lingers in the mind after the credits end. The audience may not remember every plot detail, they may not recall every conversation exactly. What remains is the feeling of having spent time with characters who resemble real people. People carrying hopes, disappointments, regrets, affections, and unanswered questions. In an era when many films strive to be bigger, louder, and more spectacular, J. Kelly finds its strength in something quieter, understanding. As J. Kelly moves toward its final stretch, the film becomes less about discovery and more about acceptance. The earlier parts of the story are driven by movement, travel between cities, meetings with different people, conversations that reopen old emotional doors. But in the closing section, that external motion slows down. The narrative turns inward almost completely. Jay is no longer searching for answers in other people. Instead, he begins confronting the uncomfortable reality that many of the answers were already inside him, waiting to be acknowledged. This shift is handled with a quiet confidence. There is no dramatic turning point where everything suddenly changes. Instead, the film allows realization to accumulate naturally. Jay starts recognizing patterns in his own behavior. He sees how often he has avoided difficult conversations. He notices how frequently he has allowed his public identity to replace his private self. These realizations do not come as shocks. They arrive as gentle but persistent truths he can no longer ignore. One of the most emotionally significant late sequences involves Jay spending time alone after a long stretch of social and professional interaction. The film resists turning this into a melodramatic breakdown. There are no exaggerated emotional outbursts. Instead, the scene focuses on stillness. Jay sits with his thoughts. He remembers fragments of earlier conversations. He replays moments from his past with increasing clarity. The silence becomes heavy but not unbearable. It feels honest. George Clooney's performance in these moments is exceptionally restrained. He does not try to force emotion. He allows it to emerge gradually, a slight change in posture, a longer pause before responding. A look that lingers a little too long on something ordinary. These small details carry the weight of realization. The film trusts that audiences will understand what is happening beneath the surface. Adam Sandler's Ron also undergoes his own quieter arc in these final sections. While Jay's journey is more introspective, Ron's evolution is rooted in recognition. He begins to acknowledge the emotional labor he has carried for years. There is a growing awareness that loyalty, while meaningful, can sometimes come at a personal cost. Yet the film avoids framing this as resentment. Instead, it treats it as understanding. Ron does not regret his friendship with Jay. He simply begins to see it more clearly, including the sacrifices it required. Their final conversations together carry a different tone compared to earlier exchanges. There is less debate, less defensiveness, and more honesty. They speak not as manager and client, not even purely as friends, but as two people who have shared a significant portion of their lives. The dialogue is simple, but the emotional weight is substantial. Words that might have seemed ordinary earlier in the film now feel final in a quiet, meaningful way. The screenplay continues to emphasize one of its central ideas that understanding does not always lead to resolution. Jay and Ron do not fix everything between them. Instead, they reach a place where they can acknowledge what has happened and what it has meant. The film suggests that this form of acceptance may be more realistic than complete closure. As Jay approaches the emotional end of his journey, the theme of identity becomes more refined. Earlier in the film, he struggles with the gap between his public image and private self. In the final act, that gap does not disappear, but it becomes less threatening. He begins to understand that identity is not something that needs to be resolved or perfected. It is something that evolves continuously, shaped by experience rather than defined by a single version of truth. This realization is reflected in the film's visual language. The camera work becomes even more patient. Shots linger slightly longer than before. Background details gain subtle importance. Environments feel less like locations and more like emotional spaces. Light, texture, and silence all contribute to a sense of reflection. The world no longer feels like something Jay is moving through, it feels like something he is finally observing. Music plays a crucial role in reinforcing this emotional shift. Earlier motifs return in softer, more reflective forms. Instead of guiding emotion, the score now supports it. It never overwhelms the scene, it simply exists alongside it, like memory surfacing in the background of thought. This approach gives the final act a sense of cohesion, as if everything the audience has experienced is gently being gathered together. A particularly impactful sequence involves Jay revisiting a familiar environment that has appeared earlier in the film. However, this time his experience of the place is different. Nothing external has changed significantly, yet his perception of it has shifted. The scene quietly communicates one of the film's core ideas that meaning does not always come from change in the world but from change in perspective. The same place can feel entirely different depending on who is observing it. Supporting characters in the final stretch serve more reflective functions than narrative ones. They are no longer just participants in Jay's story, they become mirrors. Each interaction reflects something back at him, an aspect of his personality, a consequence of his choices, or a reminder of his past. These encounters are brief but meaningful. They contribute to a sense that Jay's journey is not about moving forward or backward, but about understanding the shape of his life as a whole. The film's treatment of time becomes especially powerful near the conclusion. Time is not presented as an enemy or a force of loss. Instead, it is shown as something that carries both clarity and complexity. Earlier versions of Jay still exist in memory, but they are no longer idealized or feared. They are simply part of a continuous story. This perspective allows the character to look at his past with less judgment and more understanding. One of the most quietly emotional aspects of the ending is its refusal to provide dramatic resolution. There is no moment where Jay suddenly becomes fully enlightened or completely at peace. Instead, there is a sense of gradual acceptance. He understands more than he did before, but not everything. He feels more grounded, but still uncertain about parts of his future. The film suggests that this state, partial clarity mixed with ongoing uncertainty, is not a failure but a reality of life itself. The final scenes emphasize presence over conclusion. Conversations are shorter. Gestures carry more meaning than words. The camera often observes rather than participates. Jay is no longer defined by his fame or his career trajectory. He is defined by his awareness of himself as someone who has lived, changed, and continues to exist within that ongoing process. Adam Sandler's final moments in the film reinforce this emotional balance. Ron does not fade away or become irrelevant. Instead, he remains an essential part of Jay's life story even as their dynamic subtly shifts. The film treats their connection as something that does not need to be fully explained or redefined. It simply exists, shaped by years of shared experience. When the film reaches its closing moments, it avoids dramatic punctuation. There is no grand statement or definitive ending. Instead, there is a feeling of continuation. Life does not stop, questions remain, relationships evolve. People move forward carrying everything they have experienced so far. The final image or moment, depending on interpretation, feels less like an ending and more like a pause within a much larger story. This choice is consistent with everything the film has built. Jay Kelly is not interested in closure in the traditional sense, it is interested in understanding how people live with themselves over time. It suggests that emotional truth is not something you arrive at once, but something you revisit repeatedly across a lifetime. In the broader context of its release, this approach set the film apart from many contemporary dramas. While other films often emphasize dramatic resolution or clear thematic conclusions, J. Kelly embraces ambiguity. It trusts audiences to sit with uncertainty. It invites reflection rather than resolution. In the weeks following its release, audience discussions reflected this quality. Many viewers found themselves returning to the film's conversations rather than its plot points. Discussions focused on character motivations, emotional truths, and personal identification with Jay's journey. The film became less about what happened and more about what it meant. Critically, this aspect was widely recognized as both its greatest strength and its most challenging feature. Some praised its honesty and restraint. Others found its lack of traditional narrative closure difficult. But even critics who were divided often agreed on one point. The film lingered in the mind longer than expected. It did not disappear after viewing, it continued to unfold in thought. In the end, J. Kelly stands as a reflective piece of storytelling about a man who learns that understanding oneself is not a destination but an ongoing process. It portrays fame not as a solution or a curse, but as a lens that complicates and reveals human experience. And through its careful performances, restrained direction, and emotional honesty, it builds a portrait of life that feels quietly recognizable. At this point, J. Kelly shifts from being a story you follow to a story you sit with. The final portion of the film does not introduce new conflicts or expand the cast in any meaningful way. Instead, it begins to compress everything that came before: memories, relationships, regrets, small joys, into a quieter emotional space where meaning is no longer discovered but simply recognized. One of the most striking things about the ending is how it treats silence. In many films, silence is used as a pause before something important happens. In J. Kelly, silence itself becomes the something important. Long stretches of the final act contain very little dialogue, yet they feel full. The absence of speech does not create emptiness, it creates attention. The viewer becomes aware of small details that would normally be ignored: footsteps, distant conversations, subtle facial expressions, and the rhythm of breathing. These elements begin to carry emotional weight. Jay's final interactions with people from his life are not framed as grand goodbyes. There is no dramatic confrontation or emotional explosion designed to tie up every storyline. Instead, what we see are incomplete conversations that feel more honest because of their incompleteness. Some things are left unsaid, some apologies are implied rather than spoken, some understanding is reached without needing confirmation. The film suggests that this is how real relationships often function: rarely clean, rarely finished, but still meaningful. George Clooney leans fully into this restraint. In the final scenes, his performance becomes almost invisible in the best possible way. He is not performing emotion so much as allowing it to exist on his face. A softened expression, a brief hesitation before responding, a look that suggests memory rather than reaction. These become the tools through which the character's final emotional state is communicated. It is a performance built on subtraction rather than addition. Adam Sandler's presence in the closing section carries a different kind of emotional resonance. Ron is no longer simply a supportive figure or a source of grounded humor. He becomes a reminder of continuity. While Jay is changing internally, Ron represents the shared history that remains unchanged in memory. Their relationship in these final moments feels less like a storyline and more like a lived fact. It exists beyond explanation. The film does not try to redefine it. It simply allows it to be. There is a particularly important late exchange between them that captures the essence of the entire film without trying to summarize it. Nothing dramatic happens in the scene. There are no revelations that alter the direction of the story. Instead, what matters is the tone. For the first time, both characters speak with less urgency. They are not trying to convince each other of anything. They are not defending their paths or choices, they are acknowledging them. This shift from persuasion to acceptance quietly signals the emotional endpoint of their arc. As the film moves toward its final images, the idea of identity becomes almost completely detached from external validation. Earlier in the story, Jay's sense of self is tied to how others perceive him: audiences, industry figures, friends, family. By the end, that external layer has not disappeared, but it no longer defines him. Instead, identity becomes something internal and ongoing. It is shaped by memory, reflection, and the simple fact of having lived through certain experiences. The film's final visual choices reflect this change with precision. The camera no longer searches for meaning in crowded spaces or complex interactions. Instead, it focuses on stillness. Empty rooms, quiet streets, natural light, and slow movement become the dominant visual language. These images do not signal conclusion in a traditional sense. They signal continuation beyond the frame. Music in the closing stretch is equally restrained. Rather than building toward a climactic emotional release, the score gently dissolves into quieter variations of earlier themes. This creates a sense of circularity rather than finality. The audience is not being pushed toward an ending. They are being eased out of a journey. One of the most quietly powerful ideas in the ending is the acceptance of unfinished emotional business. Several relationships in the film remain unresolved in a conventional sense. Not every misunderstanding is clarified, not every regret is addressed, not every apology is spoken aloud, yet the film does not treat this as failure. Instead, it presents it as reality. Life continues without perfect closure. People carry forward partial understanding, not complete resolution. This perspective gives the ending its emotional honesty. Jay does not fix his life. He does not suddenly become a fully healed or entirely transformed version of himself. What changes is his relationship to his own story. He begins to see it not as something that needs correction but as something that has already taken shape. That shift from correction to recognition is what defines his arc. In the final moments, there is a sense that Jay is no longer trying to become someone else. He is simply becoming more aware of who he already is. This awareness carries both clarity and softness. It does not erase regret, but it reduces its dominance. It does not eliminate uncertainty, but it makes space for it to exist without fear. The film ends in a way that feels deliberately unfinal. There is no dramatic punctuation mark, no definitive statement about what everything means. Instead, there is a quiet emotional release that feels closer to understanding than conclusion. The viewer is left not with answers but with impressions, fragments of conversations, expressions, and emotional truths that linger beyond the runtime. In the days and weeks following release, this ending became one of the most discussed aspects of the film. Many viewers noted that it did not behave like a traditional Hollywood conclusion. It refused to provide a neatly packaged emotional resolution. But for others, that refusal was precisely what made it powerful. It mirrored real life more closely than most cinematic endings attempt to do. The conversation around J. Kelly eventually shifted away from plot interpretation and toward personal reflection. People began relating the film's themes to their own experiences, friendships that evolved over time, careers that changed direction, relationships that remained meaningful despite imperfection. In that sense, the film extended beyond itself. It became a trigger for introspection. Critics, too, increasingly describe the film in terms of emotional endurance rather than narrative structure. The performances, particularly those of Clooney and Sandler, were praised not just for technical skill but for emotional accuracy. The film's willingness to sit in discomfort, uncertainty, and quiet understanding was seen as a deliberate artistic choice rather than a limitation. Box office performance reflected a different kind of success. While not built as a traditional blockbuster, the film found steady audience interest, particularly among viewers drawn to character driven drama. Its longevity in conversation arguably mattered more than any opening weekend figures. Word of mouth emphasized its emotional resonance rather than its spectacle. Over time, Jake Kelly developed a reputation as a reflective film, one that audiences return to not for plot details but for emotional clarity. Scenes are remembered not for what happens but for how they feel. Conversations linger in memory because they resemble real conversations. Moments of silence stand out because they feel truthful rather than decorative. In the broader landscape of contemporary cinema, the film occupies a space that is increasingly rare. It does not rely on genre conventions to guide audience expectations. It does not prioritize twists or spectacle. Instead, it builds its identity through character, tone, and emotional patience. That makes it less immediately explosive but more enduring in memory. Ultimately, what J. Kelly leaves behind is not a conclusion but an impression of life observed with care. It suggests that understanding oneself is not something achieved through a single realization but through accumulated awareness over time. It suggests that relationships do not need perfect resolution to be meaningful. And it suggests that fame, success, and public identity are secondary to the quieter, more private experience of simply being a person moving through time. There is a particular kind of film that arrives not with the crash of spectacle, but with the quiet authority of someone who has something genuine to say, something that has been turning over in their mind for years, accruing weight and nuance until it can no longer be contained. J. Kelly, the 2025 comedy drama directed by Noah Baumbach, is precisely that kind of film. It does not announce itself with fanfare or overwhelm the senses with visual pyrotechnics. Instead, it chooses the more demanding path. It sits with its characters, listens to them carefully, watches them make mistakes and rationalizations, and invites the audience to do the same. The result is one of the more accomplished American films of the mid 2020s, a richly layered and emotionally alert portrait of fame, fatherhood, friendship, and the bewildering distance between the life one has lived and the life one had hoped to live. The film's title is also its protagonist's name, and that doubling is not accidental. J. Kelly, the character played by George Clooney with an unusual degree of candor and self exposure, is a famous actor, one of the great ones, universally recognized, professionally celebrated, and in almost every intimate dimension of his existence, profoundly alone. His is a name that opens doors, that makes strangers smile, that draws ovations in theaters and warm handshakes at galas. But the film is not interested in the mythology of stardom, it is interested in what the mythology conceals. Beneath the golden surface of J. Kelly's life, Baumbach and his co-writer Emily Mortimer locate something much less comfortable. A man who has spent decades choosing his career over the people who needed him, who has mistaken the adulation of strangers for the love of those closest to him, and who is now reckoning, perhaps too late, with the consequences of those choices. To speak of Noah Baumbach in the context of J. Kelly is to speak of a filmmaker who has spent his entire career excavating the tensions between ambition and intimacy. From the bitter domestic warfare of The Squid and The Whale to the sharp-tongued marital autopsies of Marriage Story, Baumbach has consistently returned to characters who are simultaneously brilliant and blind. People of considerable intelligence who nonetheless manage to hurt the ones they love most, often without fully understanding why. J. Kelly fits naturally into this body of work, though it represents a certain evolution. The protagonist is no longer young and striving but old and successful, which raises the stakes considerably. There is something particularly painful about a man of J. Kelly's achievements finally confronting what he has sacrificed to attain them. In a film about a younger man, there would still be time. In a film about J. Kelly, the sands are running low. The screenplay, co-written by Baumbach and Emily Mortimer, opens in the aftermath of Jay completing his latest film. It is a moment that might seem triumphant. Another project finished, another performance delivered, but the film frames it with an unmistakable undercurrent of restlessness and dread. Jay is a man between things, and the space between things is where all the questions he has been avoiding tend to rush in. His first instinct is to reach for his daughter Daisy, his younger child, who is on the verge of leaving for Europe before she begins college. He wants to spend time with her, to be present in the way he has so often failed to be present. But Daisy declines, choosing instead to travel with her friends. It is a small rejection, mundane by almost any measure, but for Jay it lands like a verdict. Into this moment of personal fragility comes news that compounds Jay's unsettled state. Peter Schneider, the director who gave Jay his first significant break, has died. Schneider had months earlier asked Jay to lend his name to a new project in order to secure financing of favor, essentially from the man who made him. Jay had refused. Now Schneider is dead and the refusal hangs in the air like an unpaid debt that can never be settled. This backstory, glimpsed rather than spelled out, is characteristic of how Baumbach constructs his narratives. The weight of past choices does not announce itself dramatically. It accumulates in silences and oblique references, building pressure that eventually finds release in unexpected ways. The funeral serves as a gathering point for old histories and unresolved grievances. It is there that Jay encounters Tim Galligan, played by Billy Crudup, with a performance of coiled, disciplined bitterness. Tim was Jay's roommate at acting school. They came up together, held the same ambitions, inhabited the same dreams. But where Jay became famous, Tim did not, and the difference between them has calcified over the years into something jagged and poisonous. After drinks that begin as reminiscence and curdle into recrimination, Tim makes the accusation that has apparently been festering for decades that Jay stole the part that launched his career. The conversation erupts into a fistfight in the parking lot. Jay returns home with a black eye. It is exactly the kind of scene that Baumbach handles brilliantly. Not melodramatic but not quite comedic either, occupying the uncomfortable middle ground where most of life's ugliest moments actually unfold. What follows is a decision that is impulsive even by Jay's standards. He abruptly abandons his next film project, walking away from commitments, from professional relationships, from the machine of which he is the central cog, and books a trip to Europe ostensibly to follow Daisy but nominally tied to a career tribute ceremony in Tuscany that he had previously declined to attend. His manager Ron Sukenik, played by Adam Sandler in a performance of extraordinary depth and restraint, warns him that abandoning the project will have serious professional consequences. Jay listens and goes anyway. There is something both selfish and genuinely searching in the gesture. He is not sure what he is looking for, but he knows that something is terribly wrong and that staying put will not fix it. Ron Sukenik is, in many ways, the moral and emotional center of Jay Kelly, even more than Jay himself. He is the person who has given the most to maintain Jay's career and protect Jay's reputation, who has absorbed the shocks, managed the crises, made the calls, kept the secrets. Ron's life, as the film gradually reveals it, has been organized almost entirely around Jay's. He has sacrificed his own equanimity, his own time, his own emotional resources to the service of another man's stardom. He does not complain about this. He barely seems to register it as a choice, so thoroughly has the arrangement become the texture of his existence. But as the European journey unfolds, the costs become harder to ignore. The film's middle section, set largely aboard a train from France to Italy, is among its most accomplished. The train is a liminal space, nobody is quite where they are going, and nothing is quite resolved. And Baumbach uses it to stage a series of confrontations and confidences that ripple outward in complex ways. Jay moves through the carriages like a man searching for something he cannot name, interacting with passengers who recognize him, performing the social rituals of fame with practiced ease even as something underneath is straining toward rupture. Meanwhile, Ron and Jay's publicist Liz, played by Laura Dern with characteristic intelligence and specificity, are receiving word that Tim has filed an assault lawsuit. They discuss the crisis the way professionals discuss crises, with dark humor and strategic efficiency, but the conversation eventually turns to something more personal. Their own long histories managing Jay and what those histories have cost them. Liz eventually quits and disembarks the train. It is not a dramatic moment. It is just a person who has finally had enough. Laura Dern's Liz is a character type that films about famous men often get wrong. The loyal lieutenant, the crisis manager, the person who keeps the world running while the star takes up all the oxygen. Baumbach and Mortimer give Liz sufficient interiority to make her something more than a function. She is not simply serving Jay, she has reasons for being in his orbit, and those reasons have their own complicated emotional history. When she leaves, it feels less like abandonment than like a belated act of self-preservation. The scene in which she explains her departure to Ron is written and played with exactly the right mixture of sadness and relief. Someone letting down a burden they had grown so accustomed to carrying that they had almost forgotten it was a burden at all. The flashback sequences that punctuate the journey are handled with discretion and formal precision. Jay is a man haunted not just by abstract regret but by specific concrete failures. Chief among them is his relationship with his older daughter Jessica, played by Riley Keough. The affair Jay had with his co-star Eve Hewson's Daphne Spender during one of his early films destroyed something in his family that was never fully repaired. Jessica grew up knowing what her father had done, knowing what she represented to him in comparison with his work, and the adult relationship between them is defined by a careful, maintained distance that hurts more than open conflict would. Keough brings to the role a quality of controlled sadness. A person who has made peace with a wound by choosing not to pick at it, that is quietly devastating. The portrayal of Jessica illuminates something important about the film's central argument. Jay Kelly is not simply about a famous man who neglected his family in pursuit of his career. It is about the way in which the excuses one makes to oneself about these choices accumulate over decades into something that begins to resemble a philosophy. Jay does not think of himself as a bad father. He thinks of himself as a man who loved his children in the ways he was capable of loving them, which is perhaps true and is certainly insufficient. The film is intelligent enough to hold both things simultaneously. Jay's genuine love for his daughters and his genuine failure to put that love into practice in the ways that would have mattered to them. It is not interested in condemning him. It is interested in understanding him, which is the more demanding and the more compassionate project. George Clooney's performance is the most significant element of Jay Kelly's success, and it represents something genuinely new in the actor's career. Clooney has always been a supremely skilled performer, but his skill has often expressed itself in terms of control. He is a master of the composed surface, the deflecting charm, the smile that keeps the world at bay. In Jay Kelly, Baumbach asks him to dismantle that surface to let the audience see what it has been protecting, and Clooney responds with what can only be described as courage. He allows Jay to be petty, vain, self-pitying, and occasionally absurd. He allows the charm to slip and the need underneath to show. The result is a performance of startling vulnerability. Not the performed vulnerability of actors who make a show of their openness, but the real kind, the kind that makes the audience feel slightly uncomfortable, as though they have seen something they were not supposed to see. The viral moment in the middle of the film, in which Jay chases a cyclist who has stolen a passenger's handbag and retrieves it, generating the kind of instant celebrity that the internet creates and destroys in equal measure, is a masterpiece of tonal complexity. It is funny because the image of this great star sprinting through train carriages after a thief is inherently absurd. But it is also poignant because the reason Jay's impulsive heroism resonates so widely is precisely because it looks like something real, something unperformed, unchosen, done without the mediation of publicists and image consultants. The viral clip makes Jay seem human in a way that his actual humanity in all its complexity never quite has. The irony is bitter and the film knows it. Adam Sandler's Ron occupies a different emotional register from the other characters, which is appropriate because Ron is a different kind of person. He is not an artist, he is a manager, a handler, a professional solver of problems. His gift is not expression but suppression, the ability to absorb chaos and project calm, to absorb other people's emotions without being destroyed by them. For years, perhaps decades, this gift has served Jay well and Ron acceptably. But the film is fundamentally about what happens when arrangements that have served people for a long time finally stop being sustainable. Ron's crisis is quieter than Jay's but no less real. He is a man who has organized his entire professional identity around another person's career, and that other person has never fully acknowledged the cost. The scenes between Clooney and Sandler are the engine of the film, and they are remarkable in their specificity and variety. Baumbach does not reduce the relationship to simple terms. It is not exploitation versus loyalty, or friendship versus professionalism, or love versus resentment. It is all of those things simultaneously, and the performances capture the layering with extraordinary precision. There are moments of genuine tenderness between them, moments of real irritation, moments of comedy so dry it barely registers as comedy, and moments of something approaching grief. Two men who have spent an enormous amount of their lives together, now confronting the possibility that the terms of their arrangement have been unfair all along. Patrick Wilson's Ben Alcock functions as a kind of mirror for both Jay and Ron. He is another actor managed by Ron, and he has had to accept the indignity of receiving the tribute award that Jay initially refused, only to then share it with Jay once Jay decides to attend. His resentment is understandable and entirely legitimate. But the film's most piercing moment involving Ben comes when he tells Ron quietly and almost apologetically that he is firing him. The reason is partly Ron's preoccupation with Jay. The sense that no matter how much attention Ben receives, Jay will always come first. It is the kind of professional dissolution that carries the weight of a personal abandonment, and Wilson plays it with the muted specificity that the scene requires. Jim Broadbent's Peter Schneider appears only in flashback and memory, the absent catalyst, the man whose death sets everything in motion. His presence in the film is felt mainly through Jay's guilt and through the question of what Jay owed him. Stacy Keach plays Jay's father with a quality of unresolved history that the film does not fully explain but allows to breathe. The scene in which Jay's father experiences dizziness at the party and decides to return to Maine is one of the film's quieter heartbreaks. Jay urges him to stay and fails to stop the taxi, and the image of him standing at the roadside as his father's car pulls away carries the accumulated weight of every conversation they never had. The setting of the tribute ceremony in Tuscany, the rolling hills, the warm light, the beautiful indifference of the landscape to any individual's crisis is used by Baumbach and his cinematographer Linus Sandgren with the restraint of filmmakers who trust their material enough not to over-illustrate it. Sandgren, the Swedish cinematographer best known for his work on La La Land and No Time to Die, shot the entire film on 35mm film, a choice that is immediately perceptible in the texture and warmth of the images. The grain, the slight unpredictability of the light, the way colors sit against each other, all of it contributes to a film that feels material and lived in rather than digitally controlled. It is Sandgren's first collaboration with Baumbach and it is a significant one. The visual language of J. Kelly is inseparable from its emotional register. The decision to shoot on film was not merely an aesthetic preference, it was a philosophical one. In an era when digital cinematography has made everything visually precise and controllable, the grain of 35mm introduces a quality of impermanence, of fallibility, of time passing, qualities that are deeply consonant with J. Kelly's thematic preoccupations. A film about a man confronting the irreversibility of his choices should look like a film that bears its own irreversibilities. The exposures that cannot be undone, the frames that are what they are and cannot be corrected in post. The formal choice and the thematic content speak to each other across the film with a coherence that suggests deliberate and sophisticated thinking about the relationship between medium and meaning. Nicholas Brittell's score contributes an additional layer of emotional complexity. Brittell, who has become one of the most consistently impressive film composers of his generation through his work on Moonlight, Succession, and other projects, brings to J. Kelly the same quality of musical intelligence that has distinguished his other collaborations. An ability to write music that comments on the emotional register of a scene without dictating it, that opens space for ambivalence rather than closing it down. The score is not bombastic or manipulative. It creates moods, shifts textures, and occasionally arrives at something genuinely moving without ever announcing that the audience should feel moved. The screenplay that Baumbach co-wrote with Emily Mortimer deserves particular attention for its structural sophistication. The film is organized around a series of encounters and confrontations, with Tim at the funeral, with Daisy on the train, with Ron at various points of the journey, with Jessica on the phone, but these encounters do not drive toward a conventional narrative resolution. There is no moment at which J. Kelly is forgiven or redeemed or fundamentally changed. What happens instead is something more modest and more true. He sees himself more clearly than he did before. He understands, perhaps for the first time without the filters of self-justification, what his choices have meant to the people who have loved him. This understanding does not fix anything, but it is the beginning of something. Mortimer's contribution as a co-writer is visible in the film's particular attention to the women in Jay's orbit. In a less thoughtful film, Liz and Jessica would be functions. The efficient professional and the wounded daughter, catalysts for the male protagonist's growth. In J. Kelly, they are people with their own perspectives and their own costs and their own forms of wisdom. Mortimer also appears in the film as Candy, Jay's hairstylist, a small role that nonetheless carries its own specificity. That the film's co-writer appears as a person whose job is literally to make the star look good is a joke of sorts, but it is also a quietly knowing gesture about the armies of invisible labor that sustain a famous person's image. The world premiere of J. Kelly at the 82nd Venice International Film Festival on August 28, 2025 was met with a reception that was, by any measure, exceptional. The film received a 10-minute standing ovation, the kind of response that is more than politeness, that registers genuine enthusiasm and relief, the pleasure of an audience that has been genuinely moved and does not want to let the experience end. Venice, which has been the site of many significant premieres in recent years, provided J. Kelly with exactly the right context. An audience sophisticated enough to appreciate its formal ambitions and generous enough to respond to its emotional ones. The film's competition for the Golden Lion at Venice placed it in conversation with the other major works of 2025 cinema. Noah Baumbach received the Director Tribute Award at the Gotham Film Awards in December 2025, a recognition that acknowledged not just Jay Kelly but his broader contribution to American independent filmmaking. The A Tribute to Award at the Zurich Film Festival similarly underscored the international dimension of the film's reception. From Venice, Jay Kelly traveled to the 63rd New York Film Festival and the 69th BFI London Film Festival before its theatrical release on November 14, 2025. The theatrical release in select cinemas was followed by a global release on Netflix on December 5, 2025. The critical reception was largely positive, reflecting the kind of response that serious films about grown-up subjects tend to generate when they are executed with skill and intelligence. On Rotten Tomatoes, 76% of 239 critics' reviews were positive. The website's critical consensus acknowledged Clooney's willingness to riff on his own star persona with disarming vulnerability and noted Sandler's impressive dramatic expansion, while also observing that the Hollywood satire is gentler than one might expect from Baumbach. The gentleness is in fact a feature rather than a bug, a sign of the film's fundamental generosity toward its characters, even the ones who have behaved badly. Metacritic's weighted score of 67 out of 100, based on 51 critics, placed the film in the range of generally favorable reviews. The awards season response to Jay Kelly was notably strong. The American Film Institute named it among the top 10 films of 2025, a significant recognition of its overall quality and cultural weight. The National Board of Review similarly included it in its top 10 films of the year. George Clooney's performance was nominated at the 83rd Golden Globe Awards in the Best Actor in a Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy category, a recognition that speaks to both the quality of his work and the film's generic positioning. The nomination was significant as a recognition of Clooney's willingness to work against the grain of his screen persona, to strip away the easy confidence and let something more complicated emerge. Adam Sandler's Golden Globe nomination in the Best Supporting Actor category was, in some respects, even more significant than Clooney's lead nomination because it represented a continuation of the long-running reclamation project that has gradually revealed the depth of Sandler's talent to audiences who knew him primarily as a comedic performer. Since Uncut Gems in 2019, a film that generated widespread critical amazement at what Sandler was capable of, he has been increasingly trusted with roles that demand real dramatic weight. Ron Sukenik is, in many ways, the culmination of that trajectory. A character of genuine complexity and suppressed feeling, played by an actor who has learned to make stillness as expressive as movement. Sandler's various awards season recognitions for Jay Kelly, including the Chairman's Award at the Palm Springs International Film Festival, the Maltin Modern Master Award at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and the Vanguard Award at IndieWire Honors, painted a picture of an industry that has genuinely come to appreciate what he brings to serious dramatic material. These are recognitions of sustained achievement of an actor who has been doing this difficult work consistently and who in Jay Kelly has produced what may be his finest performance. The screenplay nominations for both Baumbach and Mortimer at the Critics' Choice Movie Awards and the AARP Movies for Grown-Ups Awards recognize the quality of the writing that underpins the entire enterprise. A film like Jay Kelly lives or dies on its dialogue and its structural intelligence, and the screenplay does not disappoint on either count. The conversations between characters are recognizable as real human speech while also serving the film's thematic purposes with precision. The balance between what characters say and what they leave unsaid is maintained throughout with the kind of craft that only reveals itself upon reflection. The Astra Film Awards presented a particularly striking combination of recognitions. The Best Supporting Actor Award for Adam Sandler, nominations for Best Picture, Best Actor for Clooney, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Cast Ensemble. The ensemble nomination is particularly apt because Jay Kelly is, despite its clear protagonist, genuinely an ensemble piece in the sense that matters most. Every character in the film is inhabited by a performer who has been given something real to do, and every one of them does it. The casting by Douglas Abel and Nina Gold, both of whom received nominations, was the essential first step in making this possible. The film's setting across multiple European locations, Paris, a train journey through France and ultimately Tuscany, gives J. Kelly an international texture that distinguishes it from more claustrophobically American works. The European landscapes serve multiple functions. They are beautiful, which gives the film a visual richness that would be harder to achieve in a more hermetically sealed domestic setting. They are unfamiliar to Jay in ways that American spaces are not, which gives him a kind of anonymity even amid his fame. And they are loaded with cultural associations about art and beauty and the life well lived that sit in ironic contrast to Jay's actual experience of what it means to live well. The Tuscany sections of the film, set around the career tribute ceremony, are among its most formally accomplished. Baumbach uses the landscape with the confidence of a director who has thought carefully about the relationship between where people are and who they are. The villa, the hills, the light of the Italian afternoon, all of it is present and beautiful and entirely indifferent to Jay's suffering. This indifference is not cold, it is in its way liberating. The world does not care about Jay Kelly's regrets, and there is something clarifying about that fact. The tribute ceremony itself and the reel of Jay's performances that it features, drawn from George Clooney's actual real life filmography, including footage from his celebrated television work, is handled with surprising emotional delicacy. The choice to use Clooney's actual film clips in the tribute reel is one of J. Kelly's most inspired formal decisions. The layers of fiction and reality become productive and interesting rather than merely confusing. The audience watches J. Kelly watch a reel celebrating J. Kelly's career, which it knows to be fictional, in a film using footage from George Clooney's real career to populate it. The effect makes the character and the actor more continuous with each other than they would normally be, giving the tribute scene an emotional resonance that purely fictional clips could never have achieved. The film's final scene, in which Jay, watching the tribute reel alongside a tearful Ron, turns to the camera and asks if he can go again, says he would like another one, is one of the most memorably composed endings in recent American cinema. The breaking of the fourth wall is a device with a long history, and here it serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It is Jay addressing the audience, the actual literal audience, and asking for something that only they can give him. Another viewing, another chance to be seen clearly, to be granted the human complexity that fame has always obscured. It is a moment of startling nakedness, and it is also, typically for Baumbach, a moment of considerable ambiguity. Is it a real plea or a performance of a plea? Has Jay Kelly, after everything, actually changed? Or has he been playing roles for so long that sincerity and performance have become indistinguishable? The film does not answer. It leaves it precisely and deliberately open. Baumbach's directorial choices throughout J. Kelly are consistent with his best work. Patient, formally rigorous, attentive to the specific texture of individual moments rather than the general shape of scenes. He does not push, he observes. He trusts the performers to find the truth of their characters without theatrical assistance from the camera or the editing. Valerio Bonelli's editing is consonant with this approach. The cuts are well judged and unobtrusive, letting scenes develop at their natural rhythm while maintaining the film's overall pace. The collaboration between Baumbach and Bonelli and between Baumbach and Sandgren gives J. Kelly a unity of tone and vision that is the mark of a film in which everyone has understood and committed to the same project. The character of J. Kelly himself is perhaps the film's most complex achievement. It would have been easy to make him more sympathetic than he is, to give him enough charm and self-awareness to keep the audience firmly his corner. It would equally have been easy to make him more monstrous, to stack the evidence of his failures so high that condemnation becomes the only appropriate response. Baumbach and Clooney steer between these two reductive options with considerable skill. Jay is a person who has done real damage to real people, and the film does not minimize this. But he is also a person who is genuinely trying, in his clumsy and self-absorbed way, to understand himself and to make some kind of amends. And the film does not minimize this either. He is held accountable and humanized simultaneously, which is the only truthful way to handle a character of this kind. The film's treatment of fame itself, what it does to a person, what it requires of them, what it takes from them, is notable for its lack of sentimentality in either direction. J. Kelly does not argue that fame is simply destructive or that the famous are simply victims of their own success. It acknowledges that Jay has gotten a great deal from his career: material comfort, creative satisfaction, the experience of doing the work he was born to do at the highest possible level. But it also acknowledges the cost of those gains. And it insists that the cost has been paid not by Jay alone but by everyone in his orbit: Ron, Liz, Jessica, Daisy, the people who have organized their lives around his. Greta Gerwig's brief appearance as Ron's wife Lois carries its own resonance within the film's broader examination of professional obsession and domestic cost. Lois Suknik is a person who has had to compete with Jay Kelly for her husband's attention and time. She has, in some sense, lost that competition for so long that the marriage has simply organized itself around the imbalance. Gerwig brings to the role, in a handful of scenes, a quality of quiet complexity. Lois is neither a long suffering saint nor a neglected victim, but a woman who has made accommodations and found her own ways of living within them. That the role is played by Baumbach's real life partner, and that the film is partly about what it costs a person's loved ones when professional obsession takes over, gives the casting its own quiet, meta-textual dimension. Charlie Rose's portrayal of young Jay Kelly and Louise Partridge's portrayal of young Timothy Galligan in the flashback sequences are performances that must, by definition, rhyme with the adult performances, must feel like earlier versions of the same people, carrying the seeds of what those people will become. Both actors achieve this with considerable skill. Rowe catches the hunger and ambition of a young man who has not yet learned to manage his appetites. Partridge captures the corresponding hunger in Tim, equally intense, equally genuine, but destined to be frustrated in ways that Tim cannot yet foresee. Together, these flashback sequences give the film a historical dimension, a sense of time passing and choices accumulating that enriches the present day story. Grace Edwards' Daisy is the most elusive of the film's major characters, deliberately so. She is the person Jay has come to Europe to find, but she is not interested in being found, or at least not in the way Jay wants to find her. She is young, she has her own life and her own plans, and she does not define herself in relation to her father's needs. When Jay finds her on a train and invites her to the tribute, she declines. This is not a cruel refusal, it is an honest one. She is not punishing him. She simply has somewhere else to be. The film treats this refusal with the respect it deserves, as the expression of a person's autonomous agency, not as a wound inflicted on the protagonist. Jay Kelly is, among other things, a film about a man learning to accept that his children have lives that do not center on him. The Middleburg Film Festival, which used Jay Kelly as its opening film and gave the Ensemble and Casting Award to Douglas Eibel, Nina Gold, and the cast, was one of the first significant recognitions of the film's ensemble quality. Middleburg, a small, carefully curated festival in Virginia, has historically been a significant launchpad for award season films, and its embrace of Jay Kelly early in the fall season helped establish the film's position as a major contender. The Virginia Film Festival's Achievement in Film Composition Award for Nicholas Britell and the Zurich Film Festival's Tribute Honor for Baumbach extended the film's international reach and underlined the scope of its creative achievement.